The number one adjective we get from our customers is that this is like fun. So much of finance is limited to like control or like cost savings. But what finance is at its best is about value creation. Being in a flow state is how you become creative, and fun helps you be in a flow state. The finance model is never the only model that exists in the company. The product team has a model. The growth team has a growth model. The sales team has a sales model. The engineering team of your AI company has a super compute model and a headcount model. None of them talk to each other. And what floors me is like when you talk to users of like what exists for finance, they still have all these models, even for finance, outside of the system in spreadsheets, and they're copy pasting results here. And I just think we can do a lot better if you can give everyone this game-like clarity around how the business works. So then I talked to the recent team and they said, we've been looking for someone to build something like this. The problem is everyone who's wanted to build something is not a product person, they're a finance person. And we think the right product needs to come from a consumer product point of view that's accessible to people inside and outside of finance. And this person needs to understand the pain too, like has operated at some level of scale. And that is just a really small Venn diagram of people really quickly. And I raised my hand and said, no, that's exactly what I want to do. Let's do it.
Welcome to Turpentine Finance, a podcast where we talk with top founders and finance leaders about what it takes to architect success. Our guests speak candidly about big business inflections, market curveballs, and how they approach decision-making so that you have the tactics and mental models for when the pressure is on. I'm your host, Sasha Orloff, founder, CEO, and self-professed finance nerd. You ready? Let's dive in. All right. As you know, we occasionally bring on some founders to the podcast in addition to finance teams, and it's usually the ones who are building for finance teams. So today is one of those special episodes. And so if you don't know Siqi, you are clearly not on Twitter. But Siqi is building Runway, who has just insane, visually stunning design and ads that say the finance platform that doesn't suck. So we will find out. But you usually don't see too many successful finance platforms built by outsiders. But in this case, I think Runway stands out from the crowd. And for full disclosure, I've actually seen the product and it is like very incredible. So we're going to dive into how Siqi got here and the moment when it just kind of clicked. And in fact, I spoke with the CEO of AngelList, Avlok, who told me that Runway was the first time ever in his career that he saw a product demo and bought it on the spot. So, that should just show the power of why this is going to be such an interesting episode. Anyway, Runway's backed by the who's who of Silicon Valley, of course, Gary Tan, Andreessen Horowitz, Eli Gill, Naval, Dylan, Claire Hughes, Johns, Lenny Rachinsky, many, many more. So it's going to be exciting. And just like its founder, Siqi, you're in for a treat. Anyway, Siqi, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Sasha. That was such a generous and exciting intro. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's not going to disappoint because we have spoken many times and it is always super fun. So I want to start with like the moment that you knew Runway was a hit. But I know in order to get there, you have to sort of get through this story of how you started as a software engineer at NASA, became a serial founder, selling one company to Zynga, where you became a head of product, and another Postmates, where you led growth, and then CEO of Sandbox VR, which not a sponsor of the show, though should be. If you are in San Francisco, at least there's one down on Market Street. It is incredibly fun and in one of my favorite team building events after going skiing in Jackson Hole. All right. So I know your background's well published, but I think for our listeners who are a lot in finance teams, they might not know you quite as well. So I want to go through a little bit of your background. What are some of the key moments in your career that eventually inspired you to start Runway?
Well, I've been a founder for most of my career. So outside of Sandbox, which is like the only time outside of my first job where I worked at a company and they didn't buy it, I've been either a founder or working at a company that acquired 3 companies in as founders, as a founder, 4 companies in as a CEO. And my entire background has been not in business. I majored in math in college and I just like building things. And, part of the thing that led me to Runway today is this deep sense of insecurity over not being any kind of business person. And I remember like being a year out of college and I found myself in a position of being the CEO of a venture-backed company. After you're out of college, you have no business being the CEO of anything. And I had a Harvard MBA on my team, and I would get these spreadsheets, and I would nod my head and pretend to know what it meant, and I really didn't. So I did what most founders do. I focus on the things I thought I was good at, which is product and design, engineering. And so that's been just something I've been insecure about for quite a while, right? You have, like most people, imposter syndrome. I'm certainly have my share of it. This idea is like, why are people still giving me money and like having me run teams at a young age? Like, why is this happening? Because I don't even know what contribution margin meant. I remember I was the product growth at Postmates, and I was in a meeting one time, and I just joined a company. They just bought my second company, and someone said contribution margin in the meeting one time, and I said, "What's that?" And the answer was, "That's literally one of the metrics your team is responsible for." I said, "Great." So that's certainly been a pretty large through line in my career, like not being a real business person.
What was the trigger point that made you decide that this was going to be the next thing that you were going to work on?
So my last company, I joined as chief product officer, and then this is a company that you just mentioned, Sandbox VR. So for people who haven't been to a Sandbox VR, it's just this insane company. It's founded in Hong Kong by one of my friends, which I invested in early. And the idea is we're going to take VR and put you in a motion capture stage with a bunch of friends. And then you go to a store in a mall and you buy tickets like an escape room. And you basically have like this Matrix-like, holodeck-like experience where you get to go on adventures and be different characters in these stories. It's VR as it was supposed to be, right? It's full body motion tracking. You can like touch people and high five them and all work.
Back up next to them while shooting aliens on a platform flying into the sky.
You can go on a Star Trek adventure. You can pretend you're in Squid Games. So incredibly fun experience. So I joined that company when I was at Postmates, and we're fundraising for Postmates with Bastian, the CEO, and our CFO. And we were on this Asia tour, and I tried it for the first time. And pretty much on the spot, I decided, no, I have to move here and work for this company. This is like the most incredible experience I've had since the first iPhone. So anyway, I joined that company, and I was appointed CEO of the company 6 months before COVID hit. And the reason why is because I helped them raise the Series A, and I was going to do a lot of the raising for the Series B too. At that point, the founder and the board said, like, why don't we just switch roles? And I said, okay, let's do it. And we started raising in February of 2020 for an out-of-home VR business. And around was hot until all of a sudden it wasn't because the world shut down. And so we had to go from like around 400 employees down to no employees. Like I think we were down to 20 to hibernate the company because all of the revenue went to zero.
Hard to do in-person businesses when the world is telling you are required to stay at home.
So when this happened, our investor, Andreessen Horowitz, they had a random process where they were triaging all of their businesses. A lot of businesses were impacted by COVID. And as part of that process, we had to create these scenarios for what we're going to do if COVID lasts 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. No one knew how long it was going to last, right? Elon Musk said it was going to be over by June. And Andreessen said, no, this is going to be a 2-year process. And everyone thought Andreessen was crazy. Turns out it was 2 years, almost to the dot. And we were doing the scenario planning on spreadsheets with our CFO, who is a very experienced CFO, came from Netflix. And it was on Google Sheets, and it was miserable. Like, we had like all kinds of copies of this, and there was errors everywhere. And so long story short, we ended up deciding going from 400 some employees to 20, and about 30. And as part of that, I had to lay off most of the company, including myself and most of the executive team. The founder, Steve, basically hibernated for the next 2 years, and now it's a monster of a company, right? By the time, I wasn't sure if we were going to survive. But 30 minutes after that, I slacked our CFO. I said, hey, all that stuff that we're doing in Google Sheets, surely there was something better we could have used, right? Like Figma is a thing, Notion is a thing. We have great products today. We just didn't bother using that thing. And he looked at me, he's like, no, that's not a thing. So then I talked to the Andreessen team, and about what I want to do next. And I asked them, hey, how come someone hasn't made something good here? What if someone made something really good, like a Figma quality product in this space? And they said, we've been looking for someone to build something like this. The problem is everyone who's wanted to build something is not a product person, they're a finance person. And we think the right product needs to come from a consumer product point of view that's accessible to people inside and outside of finance. And this person needs to understand the pain too, like has operated at some level of scale. And for some weird reason, wants to work on finance software. And that is just a really small Venn diagram of people really quickly. And I raised my hand and said, no, that's exactly what I want to do. Let's do it. And that's how Runway got started.
And I think we'll probably hear some of how that inspiration leads through in how you make some decisions about your product. The inspiration for Sandbox VR of just something so incredibly inspiring and such a great experience. And could you bring that to an industry that might not think that way? One of the challenges, though, that we've heard is that it takes a lot of capital to build a finance platform along the way. So how do you know how much money to raise in the early days? And how do you convince investors that you have enough to build something to your standard of something new and groundbreaking?
This is where being a multiple-time founder does give you somewhat of an advantage in that, the first raise was really easy. Okay, we're done with Sandbox. What do you want to do next? And people wanted to put it in the seed round. But we raised $5 million in that first round. Is that like enough? It was, we weren't sure. It was enough to get off the ground and see what we can start building and see if we can make a dent here. And it was enough to build like a compelling prototype. And when we showed it to people were like, okay, I haven't seen this before. This is interesting. And it was enough to get to the next round. And the next round is preempted by Gary Tan. And so I think it's a combination of, one, is the vision correct? Is the market correct? And two, can you show enough early proof points around like how disruptive and how much low-hanging fruit there is in the space to get there? And that's what we did over the first year or so. And we were fortunate enough to be able to raise enough capital to get this off the ground eventually. But it took 3 years, really.
Yeah. So 3 years, that's an incredible amount of time, energy, discipline, confidence, maybe naivety a little bit to go in. Can you talk a little bit about what was the product iteration process like in those first couple of years?
It was miserable.
Like that was the answer I was expecting.
It was just the worst.
What was the original sort of hypothesis of differentiation or the first version of the product?
The original hypothesis is like, if we give you this pivot table view into QuickBooks, and that's like enough for people to get some value out of it. And what we quickly found is that what people really found most painful is like the forward-looking stuff. And we didn't do any of that. And the thing that made that especially painful too is you work with these like early design partners who, because they believe in what you're trying to do, are willing to take a chance on you. And they just have these miserable experiences. For example, like you couldn't even write a formula in Runway until like about 2 years ago. And we just took their model and we kind of like coded it by hand into something, and you can like drag stuff up and down. And so actually Dylan Field is one of our investors and from Figma. And Dylan did a lunch and learn that I think about a lot really early on in Runway's journey. And he described the early days of Figma. And as one of building a house, you're trying to build a house so people can like live in it, right? And he invites some people over and you show them the house and you're like, what do you think of the house? They're like, oh, it's cool. And then you ask them, do you want to live in it? And they ask, well, is there a kitchen? You're like, no. I'm like, well, no. And you just like keep on doing that. The next time you invite them over, you ask the same question and you're like, is there a toilet? You're like, no. So you go and build a toilet, right? That's basically what it was like, except for 3 years straight. And so it's just a miserable experience of like finding customers to learn from, building the next thing until like you finally get the critical mass to get it off the ground. And like that first company that pays you that first dollar and they're running their entire business on your product, like, okay, you have a foothold somewhere, right? But depending on the problem, it could take a long, long time.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors. There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, and works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. attio.com. That's attio.com.
And that's something I reflect on a lot. I think like what made it easier to get through that time was expectations. And the hard part is sharing those expectations with the rest of the team. Because the reality of it is like, if you look at the modern generation of products like Notion, Airtable, even Rippling, Figma, each of them took 3.5 to 5 years to get to market. That's like, for certain classes of problems, it's just how long it takes. And so if you kind of expect that, have that comparison, then it gets a little bit easier, but it was still miserable.
Do you think through all of this in hindsight and you're looking back, do you think there's a minimum level of feature parity, or how do you think about the balance between sort of feature parity and novelty?
You can't choose. That's what also makes it so challenging and why it takes so long, right? So, for our space, this finance platform space, the minimum feature set to get off the ground is you have to build a good chunk of Excel, and then you have to build a good chunk of Notion or reporting or charting to get it to report. And then you have to build integrations with like 600 different things because, you have to connect your HR systems and your general ledger. And that's just an enormous amount of software to build. And then once you have that, you still don't have a reason why anyone's going to use your new thing over the thing that's existed for like 20 years. So you have to figure out what that is. So you have to do it all if you want to be like massively successful, and it just takes a long time. And the challenge is like sustaining it for that long.
Totally. How do you find your very first early design partners and your very first customers?
I tweeted a lot. And I think like I actually made it a New Year's resolution, I think in 2020, to be good at Twitter. And so at the time I had like maybe 2,000 followers. And part of the appeal of Runway was, okay, like what we're building is really generally useful to any given company. And so I could build a broad audience and maybe we can get a few to believe in what we're doing. And so we just kept on telling the story of what we're trying to do and what the opportunity is. And one of my more recent realizations is just how important story is. I used to think, and I think most people think like story is something you do as one of the functions of your company. It's like you have engineering and product design and marketing, and you tell a story for marketing, and maybe you have a similar story for investors or candidates. But I was inspired by like what Lulu Chung wrote in Pirate Wires about how Andrew Earl thinks about it, this idea that story is actually the central organizing pillar of the company. And you want to tell the same story to the leadership team, to the wider team, to the customers, to investors. And that's why you exist as a company. That was, in retrospect, something we did right at Runway. Because as miserable as it was, and God bless the early design partners, most of whom churned, who were with us, they would have these like terrible experiences, in my view, and they would burn a bunch of time, not get that much value out of it. And what floors me is how many of them at the end say, don't even sweat it. We just really believe in what you guys are trying to do. Like, that's amazing, right? And I think getting that story right and like getting people to believe that there may be a possible better world that they could be a part of helping create is extremely valuable. So that's probably more than anything the one thing that we got right.
I want to get into the product, but before I do, a lot of sort of storytelling comes, I think, from the founders, and they tell a story and it evolves sort of over time. One of the things that you do to stand out differently, aside from having a great and massive Twitter following and everybody should go go follow you, and they will at the end of this, but is your website. So you put out a quite differentiated, shall we say, iconic teaser page, and then a homepage that broke the internet, at least for a day or two, along the way, to use a term that probably my kids would tell me along the way. How do you think about how your teaser page and how your website fit into your overall strategy? And then let's dive into the product.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the story, and we want everything to be congruent with why we exist and who we are as a company. And so I will say the reaction to our website and how viral went exceeded our wildest expectations. We really came in from the perspective of how do we have an identity that reflects who we are and who we aspire to be. And for that to work, there was a few things that were really important to us. So the first thing is it has to speak to you as a human being, right? You're not like a person in a suit, serious business person. Like, we're all people. And that is the philosophy of the product. Can we make this understandable, the complexities of business and the plans in human terms? And we think it was important that the website reflected that in its language and in its style and its vibes. So that's one. And the other thing that we also found really important is to do something different. There is good reasons why things are the way they are, why everyone tends to do the same thing. But because those reasons are so good, it's why people don't do different things. And there is incredible and hard to measure value when you take risks to do something new. And we are happy to bet on our ability to do something new. And it just felt different from a SaaS website, right? You're not used to seeing a SaaS website where with that kind of vibe, and we show the product so prominently. That was another thing that was really important to us. Like, I think I tweeted this like, show the product, you cowards, right? Like, well, that's what you're buying. And we wanted to reflect that. Like, we believe in the quality of our products. And so we wanted to show that off. So yeah, I think maybe the thing that'll sum it up is one of my favorite quotes is from Teller of Penn and Teller. And he describes magic as simply spending way more effort on a thing than anyone could possibly think it's worth. And that's what we did. We just spent a lot of time on it, and it worked out.
It definitely sort of brings a design and a differentiation to an industry that very much has a history in Excel, like a simple spreadsheet. And it sort of shows you want to really put your product front and center to showcase it and talk about it's different. So let's actually talk about the product today. How do you describe Runway today?
The mission of Runway is to make business accessible and understandable to everyone. That is the mission statement of Runway. And so what does that mean, and how do we actually create a product around that? So if you think about what models of business today, the artifact for the business is what's called a financial operating model. And you have a head of finance or a CFO or VP finance, or sometimes a CEO or founder create these models. And what they do is they forecast the business into the future. And they're useful because it lets you understand the implications of what's going to happen 2 years down the line of the decisions that you'll make today, right? What happens if you hire more people, spend more marketing? And our belief is that that is one of the most important artifacts in a company, and is so underutilized because it's not accessible to people outside of finance. You have this wall of numbers as an experience, and it's difficult for you to keep it up to date, to maintain it, to handle the complexity, to understand how the business works, to version control it, and to get everyone on the same page. So that's the world as it is. And the opportunity is, if you think of this as something else other than a spreadsheet, if you think of this as what it is, what we think it is, which is this is a software simulation of a business. That's what it is. It's almost like a game engine, right? In the same way Civilization or Railroad Tycoon or any of these fun games have an underlying simulation game engine. That's what the spreadsheet actually is. And if you can make it so visible, so accessible, so close to how you actually think about your business, you can create an immense amount of value, both in terms of the decisions that you make, but also getting everyone else in your company on the same page. So one of the symptoms that you can see in the world today, once you see it, you can't unsee it, of why this is a unsolved problem, is the finance model is never the only model that exists in the company. Like the product team has a model. The growth team has a growth model. The sales team has a sales model. The engineering team of your AI company has a super compute model and a headcount model. None of them talk to each other. And what floors me is like when you talk to users of like what exists for finance, they still have all these models, even for finance, outside of the system in spreadsheets, and they're copy pasting results here. And I just think we can do a lot better if you can have like give everyone this game-like clarity around how the business works. It would make business and decisions better. But I think even more profoundly, and the thing that we don't really talk about as much externally, but what drives us is it makes work better for everyone. And the reason why is because so much of our waking hours is spent at work, and we know what makes work fulfilling is autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And it's very difficult to understand the purpose and impact of your work if you don't understand how the business works. And so we see it as a vehicle for everyone to be able to understand their impact and be able to inflect change into the organization.
How do you actually convince somebody to leave Excel? Like you said, there's one of the key benefits of Excel is that if I build a model, I know exactly how it works. I know the complexities, I know the interdependencies, I know to change it. How do you actually convince people to give it a try?
Yeah, that's a question we get really frequently, and it actually it isn't that hard, which is a surprise to me. But we're not trying to like sell a vitamin. It's like, hey, this is just going to like be a better world for you if you just get rid of your Excel, which you love. The reality is when we talk to people who run finance teams, they have deep existing pain that they're trying to solve. They're motivated to find something different. And the pains are chiefly three. So the first pain is you have so much data across all of your different data sources, across your general ledger, and then your HR system, and then your data warehouses and your CRM. And you're pulling all of this data and putting it into your forecast, and you have to keep it up to date every week, every month. That's just enormously time consuming. The second thing that happens is you have more people in your company, and you need to get information from them. And you need to give information to them around what the plans are and what their intention is. And the simple thing that you can't do in Excel is, well, why can't you just share that spreadsheet, the model, to all these people? You know why you can't? Because there is no feature in Excel to lock down one column. You can hide it, but anyone else can unhide it. You can't just like hide the one column as a salary. And so no one shares anything, right? And the third thing that happens is a business becomes way more complex. You introduce new product lines, new customer segments, new geographies, and all of a sudden modeling becomes highly dimensional. So all of these pains start hitting you once you go from like 50 to 100 employees, and you have to solve it. And so we start by saying, here's your pains, we're going to solve that. And then once you're there, here's all these other things that we can do on top of it.
Obviously, you're convincing and you're compelling as a founder, and you know your product really well. But it doesn't a lot of this sound like the pitch of what everybody might say when you're talking about, I'm going to improve, Excel, which is sort of like widely used.
That's an amazing observation. And it's probably our biggest challenge as a company, which is like, you're right. Like we are saying the same things and everyone says the same things. I think Anaplan has been saying like connected finance for like 10 years or something, right? And I don't have an answer for it, except like, when we talk about it, people in our heads like, okay, that's compelling. Then we show people the actual product and they're like, now I get it. I understand what you're doing. And I didn't even know it's possible. We talked to this thing I'll remember. I was in Vegas 2 weeks ago for a FinTech meetup. And I had a half an hour conversation with a hardcore investment banking finance person who advises like companies do transactions. And I describe what we're trying to do. He nods his head and says, yeah, that makes sense. Really hard to do. And I said, just come to our booth. And he said verbatim, this is like seeing Google for the first time. The reaction was completely different. So yeah, you kind of have to just see it to really get it.
Can I put you on the spot and just see it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always eager to see the product, to show off the product of Runway. So we pull it up.
Let's do it. So while Siqi's pulling it up, if you're not watching this on YouTube or Spotify or any video, hit pause, stop what you're doing, open up your screen. All right, let's see it.
All right, cool. Well, so this is what Runway looks like. This is a sample instance of Runway. And so what Runway is first of all, it's a freeform modeling tool. So you can basically model anything you can model in Excel. The difference is in Runway, instead of every cell having a formula, every row has a formula. So you have these human readable formulas like Runway is simply cash. Cash is cash last month minus burn. Runway is cash divided by burn. Revenue is revenue last month plus current MMR plus UMR. So it's human readable, but go back to modeling in a bit. But one of the key ideas behind Runway is not just these human readable formulas, but how do we invent these abstractions that map closer to how a person thinks about their business? So for example, if you think about a sales and marketing team, right? The way they think of our business is probably not in the form of a wall of numbers that looks like this. The way a product team or a marketing team thinks of our business is in the form of, what am I going to do in the future to move the core measures of my business? Right? Like a product roadmap increases retention or engagement or your ability to charge your customers more value. Or a fundraising plan is I'm going to increase cash a year from now. And that context lives outside of the spreadsheet or view like this. It lives in Notion and other places. And so in Runway, we've able to create these abstractions that are able to connect that context with your numbers for the first time. So if you look here, we have this notion of plans, which is kind of a new thing we invented here. And the way this works is the simplest plan we have here, let's say it's a Series B fundraising plan, right? You'll notice it has an owner and it has a name. And what it does is says, take the roll called cash and add $12 million to it in the month of September. And so this is the world's simplest plan, but plans become more interesting when you realize that you can compose them and group them into roadmaps or marketing plans. So if you look at a marketing plan, it groups several sub-plans together that says, we're going to increase marketing spend by $30K a month over the course of these 3 months. And then we're going to improve the targeting of our ads, and that's going to increase qualified leads by 10%. And in June, some new creatives will drop from agency, and that's going to reduce cost per lead by $70. So these are the things that we're going to do, and who's going to do it to actually change your numbers. Again, this is the same view, and you see these numbers are changing in marketing spend, cost per lead, and qualified leads, but who's going to change them? What are you going to do to change them? That context is entirely missing, right? So that's the first thing that we do. And it's one of the examples of a new abstraction. I don't want to spend the entire podcast talking about it, but one other things we do is okay, what can you do from here? You can change your marketing spend and just move it up and down, and you can see what happens real time, or change the timing of your marketing spend, right? So we're just scratching the surface of it, but that's kind of how we think about the product. Is how do we create these constructs that actually map to how an operator would think about their business?
And we're talking about how long has it been now since you guys have been working on this?
We are 3.5 years old now. And this particular version, we've been working on for about 2.5 years.
2.5 years. And so one of the things that I think really stands out is sort of looking at it as kind of the visual power and the ease of use. One of the things that I think gets a lot of people scared too is that in Excel, you can literally see everything, because while it's simple, it's really easy. And so how do you get people over kind of the fear of holy shit, this is pretty powerful and you can do all of this? I guess what do you usually have people start doing? What's the first thing? And then where's the place that gives you comfort? How do you think about sort of visual design or design and giving people comfort in how this all fits together?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in power design, but also starting small, right? So, usually what's easy to start with is connect your HR systems. And here's a list of your employees. And now you can just group them into departments and forecast your spend by department. So that's a reasonably easy way to start. But yeah, I think we have a very good customer success team. We have very good documentation, but ultimately the thing that gives you the most leverage is a product easy to pick up, right? And if you can just start typing and you can just say Runway is just cash flow by burn, I think you really quickly pick up how to use it. The other thing is it probably looks familiar to other products that you probably use. And that sense of familiarity is not an accident, right? In some ways, we think of this as a version of Notion that does math. And so we want to feel as familiar as possible and easy to pick up. But yeah, there is a difference. But once you can see like what you get outside of it, and the this rather small learning curve is like not so bad. The actual interesting thing is like the number one adjective we get from our customers is that this is like fun, which is like not a phrase that you're used to hearing from users, especially finance products. But that is something that is not a luxury to us. We think like that's really quite intentional, and I think mission critical for us, because so much of finance is limited to like control or like cost savings. But what finance is at its best is about value creation and being a creator, and being in a flow state is how you become creative, and fun helps you be in a flow state. So that is like the North Star for us. Like, can we make it fun?
I think there's one of the parts that we feel intentionally painful about in a lot of finance. I generally say that we have a high tolerance for pain in the finance software world. Like, we've put up with so much for so long that it's almost hard to believe that software can be fun again. And that so much of our job is like, if you don't know Python, are you going to be able to get ahead? And you need to know how to code. And you spend so much of your time preparing all of the data that really one of the main drivers in the fun is actually then using that to drive and make better decisions as a company and figure out what's working, what's not working. But there's so little of that time left because you're spending so much time getting everything sort of prepared.
That's exactly right.
How do you tap into that though? Because there's so much you have to build to get to that moment along the way. Do you feel that the product is sort of ready for prime time right now?
I would say like we have a pretty large number of customers who feel that way. Like, we are running the businesses today of AngelList and Superhuman and Lambda AI, Stable Diffusion. So we have like some pretty well-known customers running their business, and they're managing hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of spend. But, product market fit is not a binary thing. I like to think that you always are reaching for more product market fit if you're doing your job right, because that means you're expanding your addressable customer segments, right? We have pull from customers with literally tens of thousands of employees, and we definitely don't have product market fit for enterprises of that size. And you never start with product market fit. So we're always looking to expand. But yeah, I mean, between 50 to 1,000 employees, like, I feel really good about where the product is, and more importantly, our customers do. So, but even then, there's so much more we could do for them. The bar is on the floor, as you've mentioned, right? It's just been a space and a segment of the market that's been really underinvested in.
Yeah, it has. And I think it's kind of easy to see after the demo why your customers are so excited and happy and sort of bring fun, I guess, back to a career that typically has been not as much fun. Over the course of time, what are the moments of inflection point that got you to today, outside of fundraising? And we talk about that, but like, what are the key insights now? If you could go back and tell Siqi 3 years ago or 4 years ago or 5 years ago, what were the major inflection points in the business that got you to where you are today?
Getting that first customer is probably the biggest inflection point, right? That first customer was running your business on the platform. And the process to get there was also quite long. And I don't think we would have gotten there without having the right people on the team. Particularly one of the people that we hired like about a year into the company, and the person who convinced me, hey, I think we're not building product and learning from customers in the right way. And the product we build is probably not solving the problem that you want to solve. And so our head of product is a person named Tanner McGrath, and he previously had a product at Amplitude. And we were really lucky to have him because we have a history of working together. He was my right-hand person on the growth team at Postmates, and he went on to do really great things at Amplitude. If you can hire people who you work with that you're willing to actually listen to, and who are like brave enough to tell you the truth, and you act on it, great things can happen. And I think we're fortunate to have that happen.
What are the top 2 or 3 changes that he came in and made?
One is we didn't just operate against like, hey, it's a self-service product and let's see how far you get. We put together customer success, and we actually unified customer success with the rest of the engineering and product organization. So we have engineers and designers and product people talking to customers and being on these calls and looking to see what is working, what is not working, what's the biggest pain point. And that's like a pretty different style than if you were building a consumer product, right? Consumer product is a lot is like instinct and taste, and you just put something out there in the world, see if it resonates. If it works, you optimize the viral loop and all that. But with enterprise and B2B, so much of it is in the details of the product. Every company is slightly different, and understanding deeply the pain and their context of every customer and synthesizing that into a coherent roadmap, and then executing it slowly until you're able to get the minimum thing off the ground. That's like challenging, and it's not something I've ever done before. This is my first B2B company of any kind. And that's probably like, for me personally, the biggest area of growth, right? Sometimes in order to grow, you have to like unlearn a bunch of things that you're valued for, right? I was valued for being a consumer product person, and people valued it to the literal tune of like millions and millions of dollars willing to invest in this company. But I had to unlearn the things I was good at, relearn a different way of doing it, and now I can integrate the two, right? But that took forever. It was like really painful. But yeah, bringing on the right people they really institute is probably like the biggest turning point for Runway.
I think it brings in a lot of fresh perspective on kind of some of the benefits of consumer design and sort of approach and attention to detail with sort of combining that, listening to your customer. It's not very common to have product and engineering people in your customer success, and listening to that and then informing it. It's usually thought of as, not a great use of time. In your case, you've learned how to turn that into the superpower between you and your product lead. Yeah.
What was so inspiring when Tanner joined the company is he spent basically all of his time with customers as a customer success person, like onboarding every single, and I would be on these calls like, wow, okay, this is how you're doing it. He was so thoughtful about what is like the highest risk things for us as a company. And what was really interesting is like the highest risk thing for us as a company isn't like making something nice. We know we're good at that. The highest risk thing is like finding a differentiator and being able to find the right customer segments that is different from who I am, which is like a rather small startup person. And so, yeah, it was a very humbling experience for me, and I'm really grateful that Tanner and the rest of the team pulled it together.
And I think it shows in the product. Thank you for seeing the demo. What's your favorite feature of Runway today?
Yeah, I already showed plans. I think that one's pretty good. Okay, yeah, I'll show my screen again. So one of the really cool things I haven't seen anywhere else. So, we have the obligatory AI demo, right? So you can do things like a creative scenario plan, and you can have Runway look at your existing plans and say, hey, Runway, can you figure out a plan for us to triple revenue next year or something? And it's able to look at your existing plans, look at your model, and create something that hopefully works, something like that. And so here's it describing like the plan that it did. It puts some visualization that makes sense. So it increases salsa characters to ensure it's using Sasha OMR. So this is actually not my favorite feature, but the really cool thing is once you have something like this, you can reference anything in your model as text. So be able to do something like by the end of 2025, we expect to have, and if you at reference any line in your model, so you can at reference ARR value as December 25, right? And what's cool is this is going to be dynamic as you change your plans around. So if you move your marketing plan back, what it's going to happen to your ARR in 2025, it'll just tell you. It's like, instead of 15 million, it's going to be 11.8. So that one feature is like probably my favorite thing, because I've written a lot of investor updates, and we actually send our investor updates, of course, via Runway, and just having to update it by hand every time is annoying. And now you don't have to. The numbers will always be live. So I like that quite a bit.
All right, last question. When you first started Runway and you look at today, what's the one thing that is the same and what's the one thing that's the most different?
The one thing that is the same is the mission and the vision and opportunity is really constant. This feels like a really underserved space, and it deserves like a really, really good product that has all of the modern design and engineering bells and whistles. That is definitely the same. The thing that's most different, I mean, well, you go from like 2 people to 35. And the thing that's really different is I can't believe the people that we're able to hire today and how much people believe in what we're doing, like not just customers, but internally. You know, you've done a number of companies yourself, so you get this, right? Like a lot of the time when you found a company, like the first couple of months, yes, you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. This is going to be amazing. And then slowly the pain of reality sets in, right? I think the most surprising thing is like, I feel better about the company today than I did 3 years ago. And we have these experiences in the team. A couple of weeks ago, I'll never forget this. Like our owner engineer, Selassie's, in all hands said, on Sundays, I can't wait for it to be Mondays. Like that is so surprising. And I certainly wasn't feeling that 2 years ago or even a year ago. But I feel that today. And the fact that the team feels that is so indescribably rewarding.
It reminds me, just funny, I was dropping the kids off at school and I made a comment and I said, Sunday fun day. And my daughter, who's 6, looks up and goes, Daddy, it's Monday fun day. And I was like, what? She goes, because Monday you get to go to school and see your friends and you get to learn and you get to like do new things. And I was like, all right, well, we need to have more fun on Sundays at home along the way. Siqi, thank you so much for sharing these insights. What is next for Runway? What can you share? Anything fun coming up?
Yeah, we're going to have some announcements in the next quarter that are pretty major, but nothing to announce right now. But if you have pain with your spreadsheet, go to runway.com.
Runway.com. You got it. Siqi, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Turpentine Finance. Share it with your executive team, direct reports, friends, and family. And if you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and subscribe. Turpentine Finance is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen, Turpentine VC, Age of Miracles, and more. Shows for experts by experts in tech.